Welcome. You are listening to The Rise of Quiet Classism. How social mobility is being restricted without anyone talking about it. We begin with an idea we all cherish. The principle of meritocracy. It's the powerful, beautiful notion that success is a simple equation. Talent plus diligent effort equals reward. Hard work pays off, and the playing field is fundamentally level. This is the promise that every developed society sells its citizens. The classic rags to riches narrative. If this premise holds true, social mobility, the ability of a person to climb beyond their parents' economic standing, should be robust, fluid, and guaranteed. But the evidence, cold and statistical, tells a different story. A story of profound stagnation. In many industrialized nations, particularly across Europe and the OECD, the social elevator appears to have stalled. Experts estimate that a child born into the lowest income bracket would need approximately 5 generations, that is, over a century, to reach the average income of their society. This isn't just an economic failure. It's a systemic fallacy in the very idea of fluid movement. More than 1/3 of Europeans, for instance, face significant barriers to professional development that are directly traceable not to their ability, but to the economic past of their parents. This is where we must look beyond the obvious, beyond the clear-cut, headline-grabbing injustices. We must focus on the silent mechanism that protects this stagnation: quiet classism. Defining the covert threat. Classism, in its most basic form, is discrimination based on social class, which is a blend of income, wealth, education, and status. Overt classism, a boss explicitly saying, "We don't hire people from that neighborhood," is ugly easy to spot, and theoretically punishable by law. Quiet classism, however, is a different beast entirely. It is a covert discrimination that operates through subtle biases, implicit attitudes, and microaggressions that are often unintentional, but profoundly impactful. It's the prejudice that manifests through unrecognized assumptions that invariably favor the privileged. Imagine 2 university students giving a presentation. Both are equally intelligent, but one's delivery is polished, their slides are professional, and they reference an obscure foreign film to make a point. The other student, perhaps, uses simpler language, and their software looks a little dated. If the professor attributes the first student's polished performance purely to innate dedication or superior intelligence, they might be committing an act of quiet classism. Why? Because the polish, the high-end technology, the obscure reference, and the quiet, dedicated study space are not markers of inherent ability. They are markers of socioeconomic access. The internalization trap. When failure becomes a personal fault. The true genius, and the deepest malice, of quiet classism is its ability to protect the myth of meritocracy. When an upwardly mobile professional is subtly screened out of an opportunity, a promotion, a crucial networking invitation, a job interview, the feedback is almost never, "Your class background is wrong." Instead, the failure is masked as a personal, individual deficiency. You lack the necessary ambition, or you aren't quite the right cultural fit, or you need to work on your executive presence. The individual is left to conclude, "I simply wasn't good enough. I didn't try hard enough." This process, where systemic bias is interpreted and internalized as a personal failing, is a powerful defense mechanism for the existing social structure. It shifts the blame for structural failure onto the victim, reinforcing the societal narrative that hard work always guarantees success, even while the system is actively placing invisible, class-based roadblocks in their path. The quiet whisper of classism tells them, "The system is fair. You are the problem." Chapter 2. The Cultural Fit Filter. The primary engine of this covert discrimination is what sociologists call cultural capital. Think of cultural capital as a hidden currency, a kind of social crypto that allows you to transact in high-status environments. It's the core differentiator that determines both your ability to get in, to enter desirable occupational positions, and to get on, to advance secure promotions and increase earnings. The hidden handshake. Cultural capital is not about grades or quantifiable skills. It's about signaling. It encompasses familiarity with the specific, often unspoken, behavioral codes of high-status groups. It's subtle. The way you dress, the manner of your speech, your norms on etiquette, and even your preferred leisure activities. These subjective, seemingly minor factors are used by gatekeepers, the HR departments, the admissions committees, the senior partners, to signal whether an individual is the right person for the job. Research shows that candidates who signal highbrow cultural capital are instantly perceived as wealthier, more competent, and inherently more deserving of prestigious roles, often overshadowing comparable objective qualifications. If you can't easily mirror the appropriate cultural codes, if you don't know which brand of bespoke suit to buy or how to talk about the latest opera, you face a cultural barrier. If you inherited these codes from your upbringing, you enjoy a cultural bridge that effortlessly accelerates your occupational success. The accent tax, one of the most immediate and painful forms of this quiet screening, involves linguistic discrimination. An accent or manner of speech often serves as an involuntary class marker, triggering instant preconceived opinions about a person's background and intelligence. Listen to this natural example, reported by a student from the north of England attending the elite University of Cambridge. The student recounted how their gloriously dull, elongated O's and H's were constantly and chirpily parroted back to them by privileged middle-class peers, usually framed as an endearing joke. When they called home, their family tried to console them. "They're only kidding," they'd say. "Stop being so emotional." But they didn't understand the cumulative effect, the constant, explicit registration of difference. The feeling of being an outsider the moment you open your mouth grinds you down. It results in self-censorship, a constant, pervasive feeling of being less than. These are micro-insults, subtle slights that signal to the recipient that their background makes them less qualified or capable. It's a psychological tax, forcing the target to endure constant reminders that their natural form of expression is inferior. The research on cultural capital reveals a critical cognitive error at the heart of professional gatekeeping. Because cultural alignment is so strongly linked to perceived competence, gatekeepers mistakenly interpret the easy cultural bridge, that effortless similarity in taste, speech, and demeanor, as evidence of superior innate ability. This subjectivity undermines the entire notion of meritocracy. When an employer chooses a candidate because they went to the right school, speak with the right cadence, or share a passion for expensive hiking gear, they are not selecting for merit. They are selecting for inherited privilege and homogeneity. And that implicit bias allows discrimination to persist, effectively unchecked, in the labor market and housing. Chapter 3. Gateways to the Elite. Financializing Entry. Quiet classism isn't just about subtle social cues. It's engineered into the institutions designed to promote success, ensuring that upward mobility is financially prohibitive for those without inherited wealth. The elite educational loop. Education is supposed to be the great equalizer, yet its structure powerfully reinforces class barriers. Elite universities often exhibit a significant bias toward admitting students from already privileged backgrounds. This bias translates directly into professional life. A staggering 58% of employers openly favor graduates from elite universities, with some firms even using institutional pedigree as an explicit screening mechanism. The numbers are shocking. A student from a family in the top 1% of the income bracket is more than twice as likely to attend an Ivy Plus college compared to a middle-class student with equivalent test scores. The elite university, therefore, acts less as a vehicle for meritocratic transformation and more as a legitimizer of inherited status, transferring the privilege of birth into a credential that grants lifetime access. And even when governments try to fix this through reforms like parental choice in school selection, the effect often backfires. High-status families use their cultural capital to strategically navigate these complex systems, leading to heightened school segregation and concentrating resources in favored schools. In cities like Paris, complex interventions, like multi-school catchment areas, have been necessary just to curb the avoidance of public schools by privileged families. The unpaid internship tax, perhaps the most blatant financial barrier disguised as a necessary career step, is the unpaid or poorly compensated internship. This isn't a minor detail. It's a systemic injustice. Research reveals that 21% of internships are entirely unpaid, with 61% offering inadequate compensation. Think about the human reality of this. To enter crucial, high-status sectors like media, finance, or politics, a candidate is required to undertake months of full-time, unpaid labor. This automatically restricts entry to only those candidates who possess sufficient economic capital. That is, typically, candidates whose wealthy parents can cover their rent, transport, and living expenses for the duration. This practice functions as a sophisticated, systemic transfer of recruitment costs. Corporations get free labor, and the cost of training the next generation of the elite workforce is offloaded directly onto the parents of privileged candidates. It is not a barrier based on merit. It is a barrier based purely on inherited liquidity. Chapter 4. The Class Ceiling and the Cost of Assimilation. For those from working-class origins who successfully navigate the cultural minefields and the financial hurdles to enter elite professions, the sociologically termed upwardly mobile, the struggle does not end. They hit a distinct barrier, the class ceiling. This barrier ensures that privilege continues to generate returns even after objective success has been achieved. The measurable class pay gap. The class ceiling is not abstract. It's tangible and measurable. An analysis of UK data, for example, reveals a substantial economic penalty. Individuals from working-class backgrounds who achieve positions in the highest managerial and professional occupations are paid substantially less than their colleagues from privileged backgrounds who hold the exact same jobs. Specifically, upwardly mobile workers in these top occupations are paid an average of £6,287 less per year. This represents a persistent 12% class pay gap relative to their professional managerial origin counterparts. In certain specific sectors, this disparity can climb as high as 17%. This measurable lower valuation of labor is the smoking gun of quiet classism. It stems from the continued operation of covert bias in performance reviews, reduced access to senior sponsorship, and exclusion from the essential social networks that facilitate rapid advancement. Psychological microtaxation. The mechanism sustaining this pay gap is often the constant stream of class-based microaggressions, the subtle, routine slights that signal to the upwardly mobile professional that they do not truly belong. Here's an example that often happens in the workplace. A manager says to a new employee from a working-class background, "You are so articulate." Now, if I told you, dear listener, your listening comprehension is so articulate, you'd probably wonder if I thought you were supposed to be communicating in grunts and hand signals. While seemingly a compliment, the comment signals surprise. The speaker did not anticipate the coworker speaking with such ease due to their presumed background, suggesting an inherent assumption of inferiority. The cumulative effect of these microaggressions, which can also involve invalidation or rudeness, is devastating. It leads to stress, anxiety, and significant psychological distress, resistance to cultural erasure. To survive and advance in these culturally homogeneous, high-status environments, many upwardly mobile professionals feel compelled toward what sociologists call an identity mutation. They feel pressure to suppress or eliminate their original cultural codes, their tastes, and their mannerisms to better fit the established mold of the elite. This forced assimilation carries severe psychosocial costs. Therefore, when an upwardly mobile person declines a promotion, avoids a leadership position, or refuses to relocate to a high-cost financial center, it is often not due to a lack of ambition, as the meritocratic myth claims. Instead, it is a rational defense mechanism, a resistance to cultural erasure. The path to success should never be contingent upon the rejection of one's own background. Chapter 5: Engineering Entrenchment, the Elite Reproduction Machine. At the pinnacle of the social hierarchy, we find mechanisms designed not for mobility, but for the highly efficient, intergenerational transfer of privilege, a reproduction of elites that is resistant to any external meritocratic challenge. Research confirms that the mechanisms of intergenerational inequality persist even more strongly among elite groups than they do among the broader social classes. Power, wealth, and cultural cachet are simply passed down, ensuring an impermeable structure at the very top. The three pillars of elite reproduction. Contemporary social research identifies three interlocking modes by which this reproduction is managed. Through family ties, this is the direct transfer of economic capital, the leveraging of inherited reputation, and the provision of social connections that open doors long before formal qualifications are even considered. Through prestigious educational institutions, elite schools and universities serve to validate and legitimize the elite's entitlement to power, providing the cultural credentials and exclusive networks necessary for future career propulsion. Through skills and networks in key organizations, this mode guarantees access to internal, highly exclusive networks and specialized career paths, propelling individuals into the highest strata and often bypassing standard, open recruitment mechanisms. This is a closed-loop system. Inherited wealth funds the elite education, which unlocks the necessary networks and cultural capital, ensuring the seamless perpetuation of status across generations. Segregation by design, physical classism. The attitudes that sustain quiet classism are so deeply rooted that they manifest in visible, physical segregation. This isn't just a historical curiosity. It's happening today. Consider this raw, painful example from the UK. A newly developed housing site in Lambeth literally installed a physical barrier to enforce class separation. One playground was reserved exclusively for the children of the better-off residents, keeping out the children from the social housing section. This literal construction of parallel lives is a visceral symptom of quiet classism. IT tells us that the bias is not merely economic. It involves a profound social judgment that enforces otherness and denies shared resources and social interaction based purely on residential status. When politicians across decades talk about removing social barriers, the persistence of these physical dividers illustrates society's enduring, quiet comfort with class separation. The vicious cycle. The consolidation of power at the top has severe political consequences. Increased economic inequality is strongly linked to heightened political polarization, forming a vicious cycle where each reinforces the other. When elites institutionalize their advantage through the mechanisms we've described, they exert disproportionate influence on policies, from tax codes to school choice, that protect their interests. The resulting inequality then fuels resentment, ideological division, and extremism. This polarization, in turn, makes the formation of broad, consensus-based solutions to structural classism significantly more difficult, effectively trapping society in a cycle of stagnation. Chapter 6: Making the Quiet Loud, Pathways to Equity. The widespread operation of quiet classism imposes a massive societal cost. economically, through wasted talent, and psychologically, on every individual attempting to climb the ladder. The cost of being othered. Sociologists have long studied the hidden injuries of class, the pervasive sense of vulnerability, anxiety, and self-doubt that class inequality inflicts. Whether moving up or down, the requirement to assimilate, or the experience of internalized classism, believing the negative messages about one's own background, leads to significant psychological distress. Rethinking ambition. Value over mobility. A critical shift in our thinking must involve challenging the narrative that upward social mobility is the only valid measure of success. The current system demands identity mutation to succeed, as sociologist Sam Friedman argues. Instead of focusing solely on getting people to the very top, we should focus on a society where all essential labor is inherently valued, regardless of the worker's cultural background. If we aggressively focus on revaluing essential work, care work, logistics, and other labor foundational to society's function, through improved conditions and significantly better pay, we can take the heat out of the attachment to social mobility. If a stable, rewarding, dignified life is achievable across a wider range of occupations, the pressure to culturally conform to reach only the few, scarce top jobs diminishes, benefiting both the individual and societal cohesion. Policy and corporate solutions. Combating quiet classism requires layered interventions, from the legislative halls to the hiring desk. Macro-level reform. Governments must implement changes to narrow the wealth gap. Aggressive progressive taxation, raising the minimum wage, and significantly expanding access to affordable housing. Workplace equity. The corporate-level businesses must recognize their role in manufacturing inequality. Eliminate financial barriers. Companies must mandate paid internships across the board to ensure career entry is determined by talent, not parental wealth. Mitigate bias in hiring. Implement blind resume reviews, removing information like school name or neighborhood to reduce class-based and institutional bias during the screening process. Transparent advancement. Establish clear, meritocratic, and inclusive promotion systems, coupled with robust sponsorship programs designed to support employees who lack the inherent social capital necessary for advancement. Cultural and individual interventions. At the interpersonal level, fighting quiet classism means constant vigilance against unconscious bias. We must commit to self-assessment to identify our own biased beliefs concerning class, attire, language, and background, and recognize how these beliefs can compromise our professionalism. Crucially, we must move toward microaffirmations, small, often unnoticeable acts that support colleagues and signal a sincere belief in their potential for success. We need a culture willing to call out and challenge classist remarks, fostering an environment where cultural differences are acknowledged and viewed within a cultural context, rather than being judged through a single, privileged lens. Conclusion: the fight for integrity. Quiet classism is the defining feature of contemporary inequality because it preserves rigid social stratification while simultaneously maintaining the illusion of a level playing field. It operates in the subtle cues of language, the invisible financial demands of unpaid labor, and the unquestioned deference given to institutional prestige. The evidence is clear. What one is, or who one's parents were, often still matters more than what one does. From the 12% class pay penalty to the institutional consolidation of elite power, quiet classism restricts social mobility not through explicit legal mandate, but through a cumulative series of subjective judgments and financial preconditions. To truly build an equitable society where merit holds its promised value, the focus must shift from simply advocating for individual ambition to challenging these systemic structures. This requires making the quiet, insidious cues of cultural filtration and hidden economic barriers loud enough to be recognized, documented, and dismantled. The fight against quiet classism is, fundamentally, the fight to restore integrity to the principle of meritocracy itself.